A workflow is a series of steps that ultimately lead to the migration of objects. When you create a new workflow, the wizard will ask you to choose a type of workflow. It will then pre-populate a workflow for you with the appropriate steps. You can modify this or start from scratch. We'll start from scratch to examine the possible steps that you'll need for any workflow. First is read from. Here's where you'll choose the environments that have the objects that you would like to use for matching and mapping, and ultimately for possible migration to a target environment. If you plan a many-to-one migration, you would choose several sources here. You have to have at least one environment to read from in any workflow. One read from step can include several sources, so you don't need a separate read from step for each one. Match objects is next. Here's where you choose the environments to compare and the criteria that Power 365 Directory Sync will use to decide if an object in one environment is the same object as found in another environment, which we call a match. If you don't read from an environment, you can't choose it here. The Stage Data step is required next. Stage Data is where you customize your workflow actions. You'll be asked to choose a template. A template contains specific preferences that you can reuse, such as password options and attribute mappings. You will choose your source and target environment pairs here, and again, you'll only be able to choose those environments that you've read from. You'll be able to choose your source OUs and even set up some OU filters if you want to narrow your scope. And finally, you need to include at least one write to environment. After the data has been matched, mapped, and filtered, what is your target? Where do you want to place the new objects and/or sync objects that were considered a match? An optional additional step would be the Run PowerShell Script step, in which you can choose a PowerShell script that will run each time the workflow is run.